Well, that was the summer of '95. I had no money whatsoever. I was working, doing research in Silicon Valley on a completely different subject and trying to start this company at the same time. And when it came time to decide, do I want to do graduate studies or do I want to start this company? And I decided to start the company. I had no money. As a graduate student, I would have received a scholarship and a stipend and so forth. In starting the company, I had nothing. I had no income source. So we found that an office was actually cheaper than an apartment in Silicon Valley. So we got this dinky little office that had a leaky roof. It was just the nastiest place you can imagine.
And you lived in it too?
And I lived in it too and showered at the YMCA. This lasted for about 3 or 4 months. And the reason we chose this office, in addition to it being really cheap, was that there was an internet service provider on the floor below. So we were able to get really cheap internet access by drilling a hole in the floor and connecting to their server directly.
I think the first is you need to work, depending upon how well you want to do, and particularly if you're starting a company, you need to work super hard. So what does super hard mean? Well, when my brother and I were starting our first company, instead of getting an apartment, we just rented a small office and we slept on the couch. And we showered at the YMCA, and we're so hard up we had just one computer, so the website was up during the day and I was coding at night, 7 days a week, all the time. And I sort of briefly had a girlfriend in that period, and in order to be with me, she'd have to sleep in the office. So work hard, like every waking hour. That's the thing I would say particularly if you're starting a company. And I mean, if you do simple math, you say like, okay, if somebody else is working 50 hours and you're working 100, you'll get twice as much done in the course of a year as the other company.
Generally, starting a business, I'd say number one is have a high pain threshold. That's it. There's a friend of mine who's got a good saying, which is that starting a company is like eating glass and staring into the abyss. Okay, that's generally what happens, because when you first start a company, there's lots of optimism and things are great, and then so happiness at first is high. Then you encounter all sorts of issues, and happiness will steadily decline, and then you'll go through a whole world of hurt. And then eventually, if you succeed, and in most cases you will not succeed, and Tesla almost didn't succeed, came very close to failure. Then if you succeed, then after a long time you will finally get back to happiness.
I think certainly being focused on something that you're confident will have high value to someone else, and just being really rigorous in making that assessment. Because people tend to, a natural human tendency is wishful thinking. So a challenge for entrepreneurs is to say, well, what's the difference between really believing in your ideals and sticking to them versus pursuing some unrealistic dream that doesn't actually have merit? And that is a really difficult thing to tell. Can you tell the difference between those two things?
Right.
You know? So you need to be sort of very rigorous in your self-analysis. I think certainly extremely tenacious, and then just work like hell. I mean, you just have to put in, 80 to 100 hour weeks every week. And
That's
then
a lot of work.
all those things improve the odds of success.
Okay.
I mean, if other people are putting in 40-hour work weeks and you're putting in 100-hour work weeks, then even if you're doing the same thing, you know that in 1 year you will achieve what they achieve. You will achieve in 4 months what it takes them a year to achieve.
The other thing I'd say is that if you're creating a company or if you're joining a company, the most important thing is to attract great people. So either join a group that's amazing, that you really respect, or if you're building a company, you've got to gather great people. I mean, all a company is a group of people that have gathered together to create a product or service. And so depending upon how talented and hardworking that group is, and the degree to which they are focused cohesively in a good direction, that will determine the success of the company. So do everything you can to gather great people if you're creating a company. Then I'd say focus on signal over noise. A lot of companies get confused. They spend money on things that don't actually make the product better. So, for example, at Tesla, we've never spent any money on advertising. We put all of the money into R&D and manufacturing and design to try to make the car as good as possible. I think that's the way to go. So for any given company, just can keep thinking about, are these efforts that people are expending, are they resulting in a better product or service? And if they're not, stop those efforts.
So the reason is that when I was a teenager, I had like an existential crisis to try to figure out what's the meaning of life. Doesn't seem to be any meaning. For me, at least, the religious texts, and I read all of them that I get my hands on, did not seem convincing. Then I started reading the philosophers. Be careful of like reading German philosophers as a teenager. It's definitely not going to help with your depression. So reading Schopenhauer and Nietzsche, I'm like, now, as an adult, it's much more manageable. But as a kid, you're like, whoa. So then I was like, man, I'm just like struggling to find meaning in life here. And then I read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and basically what Douglas Adams was saying is that we don't really know what the right questions are to ask. Like, the question is not what's the meaning of life. In the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and Earth, it turns out, is a big computer, and its goal is to answer the question, what's the meaning of life? And Earth comes up with the answer 42. This is where the 42 number comes from. And 420 is just 10 times 42. Yeah. In that book, which is really sort of a book about, it's an existential philosophy book disguised as humor, they come to the conclusion that no, the real problem is trying to formulate the question. And to really have the right question, you need a much bigger computer than Earth. And so maybe like one way of characterizing this would be to say the universe is the answer. What is the question? Or what are the questions? The more we can expand the scope and scale of consciousness, the better we can understand what questions to ask about the answer that is the universe. The more we can expand consciousness, become a multi-planet species, ultimately a multicellular species, we have a chance of figuring out what the hell's going on. And so, this is why I think we should have more humans and more digital, both biological and digital consciousness, and why we should become a multi-planet species and a multicellular species, is so that we can understand the nature of the universe.
And then the final thing is to sort of don't just follow the trend. So you may have heard me say that it's good to think in terms of the physics approach of first principles, which is, rather than reasoning by analogy, you boil things down to the most fundamental truths you can imagine, and you reason up from there. And this is a good way to figure out if something really makes sense, or if it's just what everybody else is doing. It's hard to think that way. You can't think that way about everything. It takes a lot of effort. But if you're trying to do something new, it's the best way to think. And that framework was developed by physicists to figure out counterintuitive things like quantum mechanics. So it's really a powerful method. Anyway, so that's, and then I think that the final thing I would encourage you to do is, now is the time to take risk. You don't have, you don't have kids. Your obligation. Well, sorry. Probably don't have kids. But as you get older, your obligations increase. So and once you have a family, you start taking risk not just for yourself, but for your family as well. It gets much harder to do things that might not work out. So now is the time to do that. before you have those obligations. So I would encourage you to take risks now, to do something bold. You won't regret it. Thank you.
Well, I think I'm a big fan of anyone who wants to build. So I think anyone who wants to, make more than they take has my respect. So that's the main thing you should aim for. Aim to make more than you take. Be a net contributor to society. It's kind of like the pursuit of happiness. If you want to create something valuable financially, you don't pursue that. It's best to actually pursue providing useful products and services. If you do that, then money will come as a natural consequence of that, as opposed to pursuing money directly. Just like you can't sort of pursue happiness directly, you pursue things that lead to happiness. But there's not like direct happiness pursuit. You do things like, fulfilling work or study or friends, loved ones, that as a result make you happy. So that's it sounds like very obvious, but generally, if somebody's trying to make a company work, they should expect to grind super hard, except that there's like some meaningful chance of failure. But just be focused on having the output be worth more than the input. That are you a value creator? That's what really matters. Making more than you take.
Try to be useful. Do things that are useful to your fellow human beings, to the world. It's very hard to be useful. Very hard. Are you contributing more than you consume? Can you try to have a positive net contribution to society? I think that's the thing to aim for. Not to try to be sort of a leader for the sake of being a leader or whatever. A lot of the time, the people you want as leaders are the people who don't want to be leaders. So, if you can live a useful life, that is a good life, a life worth having lived. And like I said, I would encourage people to use the mental tools of physics and apply them broadly in life. They are the best tools. Do you wish for world peace and happiness all the time? Are you sure? Mm-hmm. Because that might be a society that is essentially sterile and ossified, that never changes, that is ultimately doomed.
This kind of tension between darkness and the light.
This is really a very good summary. It really gets to the point. This is not simply regurgitating Brave New World, it's actually getting to the salient element of Soma as a drug. Do you actually want to be in a situation where everyone is happy all the time, even though it's artificial? Or is it better to confront the challenges of life and experience the full range of human emotions, even if it means experiencing pain and suffering?
I think too is you got to make sure that whatever you're doing is a great product or service. It has to be really great. And I go back to what I was saying earlier, where if you're a new company, unless it's like some new industry or new market that, if it's an untapped market, then you have more ability to, the standard is lower for your product or service. But if you're entering anything where there's an existing marketplace against large entrenched competitors, then your product or service needs to be much better than theirs. It can't be a little bit better, because then you put yourself in the shoes of the consumer and they say, why would you buy it as a consumer? You're always going to buy the trusted brand unless there's a big difference. So a lot of times, entrepreneur will come up with something which is only slightly better. And it's it's not. It can't just be slightly better. It's got to be a lot better.
But I encourage people to read a lot of books. Just read, like, I mean, basically try to ingest as much information as you can, and try to also just develop a good general knowledge. So you at least have like a rough lay of the land of the knowledge landscape. Like try to learn a little bit about a lot of things. Because you might not know what you're really interested in. How would you know what you're really interested in if you at least aren't like doing a peripheral exploration of broadly of the knowledge landscape? And you know, talk to people from different walks of life and different industries and professions and skills and occupations. Like just try, you know, learn as much as possible. Man's search for meaning.
Isn't the whole thing a search for meaning?
Yeah, what's the meaning of life and all, you know. But just generally, like I said, I would encourage people to read broadly in many different subject areas, and then try to find something where there's an overlap of your talents and what you're interested in. So people may be good at something, or they may have skill at a particular thing, but they don't like doing it. Mm-hmm. So you want to try to find a thing where that's a good combination of the things that you're inherently good at, but you also like doing.
Number 3, I'd say, is constantly seek criticism. A well thought out critique of whatever you're doing is as valuable as gold, and you should seek that from everyone you can, but particularly your friends. Usually, your friends know what's wrong, but they don't want to tell you because they don't want to hurt you. So they'll say, "Oh, I wouldn't encourage my friend, so I'm not going to tell him what I think is wrong with his product." Yeah. It doesn't mean your friends are right, but very often they are right, and you at least want to listen very carefully to what they say. And to everyone, you're looking for, basically, you should take the approach that you're wrong. That you, the entrepreneur, are wrong. Your goal is to be less wrong.
You don't need college to learn stuff, okay? Everything is available basically for free. You can learn anything you want for free. It is not a question of learning. There is a value that colleges have, which is like, you know, seeing whether can somebody work hard at something, including a bunch of sort of annoying homework assignments, and still do their homework assignments and kind of soldier through and get it done. You know, that's like the main value of college. And then also, you know, if you probably want to hang around with a bunch of people your own age for a while instead of going right into the workforce. So I think colleges are basically for fun and to prove you can do your chores, but they're not for learning. But there is a requirement of evidence of exceptional ability. Like you just can't, if you're trying to do something exceptional, you must have evidence of exceptional ability. I don't consider going to college evidence of exceptional ability. In fact, ideally you dropped out and did something. I mean, obviously, you know, we look at like, you know, Gates is a pretty smart guy, he dropped out. Jobs is pretty smart, he dropped out. You know, Larry Ellison, smart guy, he dropped out. Like, obviously not needed.
So are you optimistic? I read in your Rolling Stone article back in the day that you said you can never be happy unless you're in love.
Well, you can be half happy, I suppose. There's two things. I think to be most happy, if you're happy in love and you love your work, then
Right.
you'll be, I think, fully happy. If you lack either of those two, if you have one of those two things, be half happy.
There are always problems on Earth. There are always problems on Earth. There are always things that we wish to be better, that we want to solve here on Earth, and we should solve them. But there also have to be things that get you excited about the future, that make you glad to wake up in the morning. because you can't wait to see what happens next.
I think technology is the thing that causes these big step changes in civilization. So obviously you've got things like, say, the Gutenberg press, before which
Right.
it was very difficult to get books. They were
Yes.
very rare. Even if you had a thirst for knowledge, you really couldn't do anything about it because there were very few books to read. So, and the internet is something beyond the Gutenberg press, I think. But you know, it's when I first saw the internet coming into being in a way that the general public could use it, it felt like the humanity as a whole was developing a nervous system. So previously, the way that information would travel would be by osmosis, one person to another, or one person calling another. But the access to information was very limited. Now with the internet, it's like having a nervous system. It's like any part of humanity has access to almost all the information of humanity.